Hello, welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino, founder, CEO of Project Purple. And today we're back in the podcast studio, and I've got a special guest for our audience today, watching on our YouTube channel and also listening here on our podcast channel, but coming to us from Chicago. I don't think he's originally from Chicago. I know the last time I talked to Rainer Zach, he was in California, but welcome to the Project Purple podcast, Rainer.
Thank you, Dino. Appreciate it. It's nice to be here. Thanks for all the nice things you're doing for people like me and caregivers.
Well, as we were saying before we hit record, I got into this for my dad, from our family experience, but it's evolved and it's become so much more for families like yours that are going through it and families that have come to us and have participated. So it's truly an honor. Our podcast has been something that's been really special for me. I had this idea, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And now fast forward, we're 4 years into this, and the survivors that have come on, the participants, to just share their journey in an effort to raise awareness for this thing called pancreatic cancer is just really, really special. So anytime we have survivors on, I get really excited because to me, this is why we do what we do every day, to get more survivors, to raise awareness. And so when we're able to share stories of survival and stories of what people are doing to beat pancreatic cancer and to live every day with pancreatic cancer and how they're getting by, because as I've seen in now 12 years in this disease, it's not one size fits all. Everyone goes about it a little bit differently, but you just never know who's listening or who's watching on the other side that potentially could benefit from something you may say today or something that we've said on a previous podcast with another survivor or fighter. So the honor's all mine. So thank you for making the time and for coming on board. And as I mentioned, the first segment is always dedicated to the guest. This is your opportunity to share with our audience kind of your backstory, what brings you here today, how you got there. And with that, the mic is yours, Rainer.
All right, thank you. You're right. I'm not from here originally. I came to the U.S. in '89. I was just here by accident. I was trying to go to Hawaii to become a professional windsurfer. That was my thing back then. And then somebody invited me to stop in New York to visit them, and that visit turned into 10 years. And then I was in Chicago for 10 and Los Angeles for a little bit. And I've been in San Diego since 2012, but I'm in Chicago now visiting friends with my children. And then we're flying to Europe next week for about a month to visit my folks. Yeah, so a busy summer. So I was always pretty healthy. I was exposed to secondhand smoke for about 25 years. I used to work in the restaurant industry in New York City. I also briefly smoked for a couple of years, about 20 years ago. But other than that, never really had anything. Maybe got a cold every 5-6 years, and that was it. And then in May of 2020, I was ready for my annual checkup, and I felt like a little bit of pressure on my stomach. And miraculously, I had lost 4 to 5 pounds in a few months, and without doing anything different. I was kind of excited about that. When I got diagnosed, I put things together. I'm like, okay, nothing. You don't just get a free weight loss, So I got diagnosed pretty quick. My doctor was pretty amazing. They ran me through a whole bunch of tests. Within 2 days, I was diagnosed. I got lucky. My girlfriend, she's a nurse, so she helped me. We got a second opinion and a third opinion from Johns Hopkins and I think Mayo Clinic. Within 4 weeks, I was in chemo treatment. I had no idea about cancer. There's no cancer in my family. I don't know anybody really with cancer. I had never thought about it. And it was kind of, first I was lost, but then I had help from friends. But all I knew was there's, chemotherapy, which is poison. There's burning, which is radiation. And there's, immunotherapy. So I started my journey with that. Lost, basically by the first doctor I saw, he told me I had 3 to 6 months to live. If I started chemo, I might be able to extend it to 12 months. I had a whole list of questions, like 50 questions. After the 10th question, I already kind of felt he was rushing me. When I asked him about nutrition, he he looked at me like, "What do you mean nutrition?" I'm like, he's like, "You can eat whatever you want. Try to eat high calorie foods." I'm like pizza. He's like, "Yeah, pizza, ice cream, yeah, ice cream." So he had no nutritional training, I think. So that wasn't for me. I didn't really find any other doctors that were heavily vested in any alternatives besides chemo. But I did end up starting my chemotherapy, and the success was pretty good. Tumor shrunk pretty rapidly, but I was deteriorating pretty quickly. I went from a 210 pounds to 155. I got neuropathy, so I always had cold feet. I was starting to stumble a little bit. I was so weak I could barely walk up the stairs. I would throw up like 10 times a day. Um, yeah, it was pretty bad. And for my kids to see that was pretty rough. Yeah, so then I started looking for alternatives. Luckily I was able to stop working. I have a small business and my partner, keeps running it. So I was lucky enough to just dedicate all my time to research into alternatives and nutrition and different ways of healing. And then slowly I kind of developed my own methods. I stopped the chemotherapy. I'm now on a inhibitor drug, which is targeted for my mutation. I'm taking half the dose of that, and I don't really have any side effects. And my tumor is currently inactive, according to the blood data, and they're about 20% of the original size. I did get a stent placed about a year ago, which is in there and has to be replaced about once a year, and that was just done as well. Yeah, so that's my story for them.
So I've got a couple questions, of course, here, but taking notes. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning. Where are you from originally? You said you came here in
From
'89.
Germany. Oh, sorry.
Okay, Germany.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned you were looking to become a professional windsurfer.
That was my dream. Yeah.
So anyone who's at that level, anything professional sports wise, you're probably in pretty good shape.
I was in good shape pretty much all my life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Eating, working out, doing everything you need to do to become a professional in that sport, regardless of whatever sport it is, you're training at a very high level. So yeah, you may go out, party, whatever, but you're still burning tons of calories. You're still working out, your physical activity. So you weren't sedentary, in terms of your lifestyle and the smoking thing. I always, hindsight's always 2020, right? As we look back, but as you said, and I want to, you mentioned two things here. There was no cancer history in the family. And in terms of lifestyle, wasn't like you were going out raves every night, partying late to the night, recovering. So lifestyle wise was pretty normal, and health wise, really nothing that we could look back, again, hindsight being 2020, to say, oh, maybe like 10 years prior, I had this like massive indigestion that wouldn't go away for like a month, but then it went away and I never thought about it twice. There was nothing like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was no event. There was the exposure to secondhand smoke, which was pretty heavy for many years,
But then we could say, though, everyone who was in the early 90s and late 80s that worked in a restaurant would be getting cancer
true.
at this point,
That's
right?
true.
I think that's hard to, I remember like even as a little kid, I remember going, my parents are Italian with a name like Dino. I remember going to Italy the first time. I mean, there people were smoking on the plane. Like,
Yeah, in
listeners,
Germany too.
you know, right, right,
My
and then in
grandpa
Europe,
smoked for
like,
80 years, so yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it's
And I
that,
also
and I think stress is a big factor.
correct, yeah,
That's kind
yeah,
of
the
I think
stress.
what it did for me. I did a pretty bad divorce and custody battle for many years. So I think stress is a big part of it. And I think it's that also kind of opened my eyes to the opposite must be true, right? If we can think ourselves sick, we can think ourselves healthy. I don't know if you're
Correct.
familiar with Joe Dispenza. I'm sure you are. That's his kind of teaching. So been doing a lot of that meditation work,
Hmm.
visualization and things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, the mind is an amazing organ, the brain, I should say, and I think doing the podcast as long as we have, having the amount of survivors we've had, I will tell you this, Rainer, and the audience listening, that there are a lot of commonalities that I've seen. And one day, maybe I'll write a book about this, or we'll do some sort of research on this, as have someone listen to each podcast that we've had with survivors on. But the point here is that the mental approach to cancer is pretty different than other people, because I think a lot that I've heard, throughout the years from various survivors is just that mental approach, that mental aspect that they can beat this thing and cancer doesn't define them. And, winning the battle, mentally, regardless of how many treatments or how tough the treatments are, they're still winning,
Yeah.
and the brain and the mind is such a powerful organ. And that mindset, I think, is critical, because I think it's easy. The challenging piece, and you mentioned this. The chemo, does have a lot of nasty side effects, and that can bring people down really quick. And that's not to say that people who don't, get back up, there's nothing against, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole, early on if you have a bad reaction to the chemo, or if the numbers don't move as quickly as possible, or if you have some really nasty side effects. And that's I think the challenging piece with this disease is that with other cancers, I think the quality of life with chemotherapy treatments is a little bit different. And it's a little bit more predictable, I guess I would say would be probably the better term. And that's where I think, is part of the frustration from the awareness community and also from the medical community, I'm sure as well, with many doctors, where, one patient has a really good experience on a certain chemotherapy protocol. And then you bring in a similar patient in, and they have a complete 180-degree difference, in terms of quality of life and how they experience and what their reaction is.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not, I'm not against chemotherapy. I'm just, I just think, people don't get any options. It's
No.
like to me, when I started my treatment, it was like, I was a spectator in the whole thing. That's kind of how I felt. And, I know, I don't know, it's hard to say. You do so many things, what's helping. Maybe the fact that the initial chemo knocked it down quickly was a game changer. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
You know, but
You mentioned, no, I just want to ask this question quick, and then I want to talk about that spectator concept that you have there. But you mentioned mutation. So did they do genetic testing on you? Because that was one of my questions here.
well, we had that done. I mean, they didn't offer that, but without my girlfriend, I wouldn't know about this. But she did, and they found a rare mutation. And my this drug that I'm on is it's not that damaging. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's the reason I'm doing so well, or the cancer is inactive. But if it's not damaging me long term, then I'm okay taking it. That's the crazy thing that takes time to understand. The doctors, once you get diagnosed stage 4 pancreatic cancer, they don't they're not looking at the damage they might be causing you 10 years down the road, because 90% of people, or 99, won't get to that point, you know. But then
Correct.
when you get to my point where you're 2 years in and you're doing well, and you're like, well, I mean, I believe that I'm going to, well, whatever I'm doing now, if it destroys my liver in 5 years, then I'm not going to do it, you know, because I'm going to be around for 5 years. So it's just a lot of decisions that, you know, doctors don't make and don't offer, and that you have to come up with yourself and then make with your family, you know.
So on that point though, do you think, this is a loaded question, there's no right or wrong, but given your experience, do you think it's a lack of knowledge by the doctor, or do you think it's a systemic issue, the system?
Yeah, I think it's a systemic issue, and that causes lack of knowledge, because, you know,
Correct.
there is no nutritional training, for example, right, required in many of the courses, colleges. Some do, they all offer them, but they're not required.
Yeah.
And the workload is so intense. I mean, my oncologist assistant is not even finished, and he's been going to school for 24 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then,
It's
I mean, my
crazy.
doctor has 250 patients, you know, so I don't know. You know, I think I really don't know how the system is different, you know, because I haven't been sick in another country. I know from Europe, it's I mean, financially it's better because it's more or less free. But
Yeah.
you know, I do know, and it's anecdotal, that some of my friends back there, it took a long time to get into treatment. You know, so
Correct.
if I started my chemo 4 weeks after my diagnosis, and I had 3 opinions, and I had 3 doctors that I talked to and had interviews with, and I was on the first trip 4 weeks after. So, you know, had I waited 3 months, I might have been too late, you know. So, but yeah, the system, yeah, I don't know, you know.
Yeah. I think, and we've talked about this a couple times on the podcast. We've had a couple patients leave the country to seek treatment, seek alternative treatments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus here, but, you know, our job as an awareness foundation, we hope to raise as much awareness with the podcast and what we do with our events about the disease. The reason why I started Project Purple is I saw cracks in the system.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the challenges that my dad and my family were experiencing, and I wanted to change that. So by coming on the podcast and having people talk about this, I think is critical. And it almost pains me, Rainer, you know, here we are 11 years. My dad died in 2011. So here we are 11 years later, and I still hear the same horror stories that we experience in terms of misdiagnosis, or to what you're saying is like, hey, you know, there's really, you know, the doctor tells you the chemotherapy, and now thinking about it, and I've become really good friends with a lot of medical oncologists and a lot of surgeons. Not many of them know anything about nutrition. And to your point, they say, yeah, just get calories in. If it's ice cream or if it's Taco Bell or McDonald's, it doesn't matter. And I remember hearing you say that, going back to my own personal experience with my dad, when he wasn't eating, the same thing was said. That was
Mm-hmm.
11 years ago. But how much have we, like, so you mean to tell me we haven't progressed in 11 years with what we know about diet, right? And what we know about certain foods, and what we know in particular with cancer, how much sugar impacts certain diseases, right? And now we look at, you know, obesity as a risk factor for so many diseases, including pancreatic cancer. So it's kind of, how do I put this politely, using the right term here? You know, if the oncologist is saying, hey, just eat whatever, but we know that certain foods make us sick that are not good for us, it's kind of counter. It doesn't make sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So where like me as a person of trying to raise awareness and trying to change the system is like, so where do we find that connection, right? Where do we find where that disconnect is to fix that. To say to the medical community, hey, wait a minute, let's put the brakes on. Let's bring in a nutritional consultant. Or, you know what? My dad used to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, yeah, you can. Now, like, make nutrition part of the training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Part of oncology training, or, somehow incorporate that, because nutrition is so vital.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can add more workload to the medical field, and let them do nutrition, but they should work hand in hand with the nutritionist. My hospital, I'm at Scripps, MD Anderson in San Diego. I mean, that's one of the top hospitals. They do have a nutritionist, and they did give me the option to talk to her, which is nice. But I bet you most hospitals don't even have that, And then I did talk to her, and I mean, I'm not saying I am saying I think I know more than she did, to be honest with you, because I don't know if, fasting, I think, is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself, right? And she was like, she didn't have no opinion on it. I'm like, I'm intermittent fasting. That's what I do. My parents been doing it for 25 years. They're in their 80s. They're fully cognitive. She had no idea about any of that. So, but yeah, it's nice to have a nutritionist to fall back on, if you have no idea about nutrition.
So talk about the fasting here for a second. Was that something that you did prior to being diagnosis, or was it something that you incorporated?
I've done it off and on, not religiously, but my parents have, and I now do it religiously. I even try to eat in a shorter window, just 6 hours. But and then I try to throw in one full day of no eating. After 24 hours, the benefits are just multiply. You start producing growth hormones, and all kinds of great things happen. So if I can, my willpower, maybe once or twice a month, I'll do a 36-hour fast.
So for our audience listening at home and watching, so intermittent fasting, let's define that for them. So my understanding was, like, intermittent fasting is you do not eat any food. I don't know if you can drink. You can drink, I think, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But you do not eat any solid food for like a period of longer than, I think it's like 18 hours or 12 to 18 hours, in that range.
8 hours eating and 16 hours no eating.
Yeah. But, so then you have that block.
In a shorter period, it's supposed to be better, And we were led to believe to eat like 5 small meals throughout the day.
Correct.
Because, somebody wants to sell snacks, right? I mean, a little energy bar, which is basically just sugar.
$5.
Yeah. You want to sell 2 of those a day. You got to have 5 small meals.
Well, it's fascinating. Yeah. We're joking here about the snacks, right? But I laugh. We just had our golf outing yesterday, and we had a brewery there. They do craft beer is very big, has been very big here in Connecticut over the last 5 years. It's just kind of exploded.
Yeah.
But the craft beer guy was talking about now how they got into water.
Yeah.
Because remember 10 years ago, there was really like Poland Spring, and then there was like a handful of waters.
Yeah.
Now everyone's got a water. Everyone's got a bubble water, carbonate, seltzer water, all that, in the can and everything. So it's fascinating, going back to snacks, right? Like, I remember that was like, have 5 small meals a day. And then what did we see? Mass production of snacks, Doritos, all sorts. And then, bagel bites. You can get all these things that are mass produced.
Snacks, those protein bars. And then
the protein bars.
That's good
the Gatorade.
Right?
Yeah. The Gatorade's really good for you, with like 70 grams of sugar in it. That'll keep you up. Yeah. So it's fascinating with that. So interestingly enough, and I don't know if you saw this, but, and please don't, for those listening, I'm not an expert on this, but I do remember there was actually a study. I don't know if it was in the New England Journal of Medicine or if it was one of the other cancer publications that talked about the benefits of intermittent fasting and certain chemo regimens for pancreatic cancer. Like, it was actually a pro article for that. Mm-hmm. But again, this brings us back to diet, right? Like, and what also people are ingesting, and how they're ingesting that and when they're ingesting that, which is really critical. I've got a question for you though. I want to go back, not all the way to the beginning. I asked you the question, like the system, what is this a system? Whose fault is this, or is it dot knowledge? Can you look back, and hindsight's always 2020, Rainer, and you mentioned your girlfriend a couple times that she was a nurse and you had the benefit of that. Was it maybe your upcoming, being from Germany, not necessarily being born here in the United States and going through our educational system? Where did that, and I guess the term would be like self-advocate,
Mm-hmm.
that advocating for yourself. Where did that come from? And maybe was there a point in this journey that maybe the switch was flipped, or maybe it was from the very beginning that, you started to think about these things and have kind of these inner dialogues, or maybe talking to your girlfriend or talking to these doctors and realizing like, hey, this guy knows nothing about nutrition. Like I got to find someone else that knows about this, or I got to educate myself. Where does that come from, or when did that happen?
I think I was always into eating healthy, nutrition, and exercising. And I mean, I read books on health and nutrition and things like that, just for fun. And and yeah, initially, I mean, I just followed their advice, and then it wasn't. I mean, it was working to the fact that I was still alive, but I didn't have a quality of life. And you know, that was basically the chemo was basically killing me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I don't know. I was never like a rebel questioning his authorities or dogmas or things like that. But when things didn't work, they didn't really have another alternative. And I mean, the way they looked at it was kind of strange for me, right? They kind of looked at, okay, so we're going to try this drug, this combination. Your tumor is going to get smart in 2 to 3 months. Then we're going to switch to this one,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll do this one, and then we have one more. So basically, they didn't say, that's your limit, but they're like, then we have one more. And they're like, okay, so you have 4 things you can do for 3 months at a time, and that's it. I'm like, there's got to be something else, And then I just started researching, and I was lucky enough to have the time to do it. And then I just came up with different things, and I tried it, and they started working. So, and then but I really like the more I think about it, the more I feel the mental part is the main thing. I met a gentleman on my recent travels in Mexico. His name is Bradley King, and he was a survivor of a very rare cancer, and he did it just by meditating. Like Dr. Joe Dispenza, I don't know, if you're familiar with him, but he basically followed his program, and he's now a health coach. And he kind of pointed me in that direction because I have all these things that I do physically that I shared with him. And he's like, well, that's interesting, but I don't do any of these. I'm like, do you eat organic? He's like, not really. I'm like, okay. So he was just doing meditation. So I started focusing a little bit more on the mind aspect of the whole healing part.
So let's talk about that. So what is your routine like? I know you mentioned, the targeted drug for the rare mutation,
Mm-hmm.
doing the intermittent fasting. Are you heavy deep into meditation as soon as you wake up? What's that routine look like?
Well, I start with the Wim Hof
Wim Hof,
breathing.
yep. Awesome.
I usually do about 5 to 8 cycles. I really get into it like totally deep. I mean, it's amazing, amazing feeling. And while I do it, I visualize I switch it off. Sometimes I visualize no disease at all, like everything being healthy down there. Sometimes I visualize little planes attacking the tumors and throwing bombs and, whatever I can think of, just a visualization of that. And then I do my cold exposure. When there's no real cold water, I just do the cold shower for like 2 to 3 minutes. But if I'm home in San Diego, I have like a cold plunge, or
Mm-hmm.
I go to the cold pool in this gym that I go to, and the water is 39 degrees. I do 4 minutes in that, and then I feel like Superman, right? And for the next 4 to 6 hours, I feel so great and amazing and happy, and yeah. And then I usually eat around noon or 1 o'clock, I really try, I'm not super strict. I always thought like if you deprive yourself of everything fun, I don't think it helps the healing. So I do love my
Hmm.
bacon every once in a while. I do enjoy a beer every once in a while. I splurge on potatoes or, rice or whatever. So I don't do necessarily do cake or stuff like that or ice cream a lot, but, lots of greens, limit my intake of dairy and meat. If I do eat meat, just try to do grass fed, but it doesn't always
Hmm.
work. I don't drive myself crazy with it. Then I drink a mix of raw garlic and lemon juice. I do like 1 part of garlic, 3 parts of lemon. I throw ginger in there, turmeric. I mix it, I blend it, and I squeeze it through some cheesecloth. And I drink 4 ounces after every meal. That was one of Chris Beat Cancer's podcasts of a professor from Dubai who did the study with mice, and they had an amazing success rate. So I've been doing that for about a year. And the got with the lemon, it's very drinkable. And, you barely have a smell or anything. Yeah, so that's my routine in the morning. Takes about 2 hours. And then I do coffee enema every morning. That takes time. So it's, um, yeah, exercise. I try to lift weights to keep muscle. It took me a little bit of time to gain my muscle back. Um, I walk pretty much every day. I take a whole bunch of different supplements. Um, I do take a lot of melatonin. I read a lot of
Hmm.
studies on that. I take like 12 milligrams 4 times a day. I take Rick Simpson oil. I used to take the full gram for about 2 months. Looks like the recommended protocol. And now I just take it at night. Um, I take fenbendazole. You know what that is?
No.
It's a dog dewormer.
Huh.
Um, I've been taking that for a long time, and yeah, there's about 25,000 people on that support group on the internet taking it with a lot of success. So I've been taking it.
We've had someone else on the podcast that has taken that
Yeah,
because I remember now when you said dog dewormer, then the light bulb went off. But someone else on the podcast has mentioned that they were on that protocol, and it
hmm
might be very similar to what you're saying.
yeah,
Um, my memory is not as sharp this morning because of our golf outing yesterday, but that does ring a bell.
yeah, yeah. What else? I eat a lot of nasty stuff like sardines, which I hate. I have to close my nose when I eat those
You don't like sardines?
for the omega 3 fatty acids. I A lot of like raw like greens and raw
Uh-huh.
kale, and it's like I always ate healthy. Now I'm super healthy, and I just started kind of liking the stuff, getting used to it, like snacking on Brussels sprouts instead of chips,
Yeah.
things
Well,
like that.
so very conscious about what you're inputting
Yeah,
into your
a
body.
lot of mushrooms. I mean, I try to get just tons of organic raw food into me, like whatever, as much as I can, you know.
So from a nutrition standpoint, nothing processed,
I
nothing
mean,
highly
you
processed.
cannot
I mean,
always. I mean, I do travel
it's
a
so
lot.
hard.
I travel a lot, and it's hard to do. And if
Correct.
I just came back from a 3,000-mile motorcycle trip down to Mexico, and you can't bring all your organic stuff and
Correct.
your
Yeah.
spices. You're somewhere in a taco shop in Mexico. It's not going to be organic, but whatever. I think
But
I think
it's not
the
fully
mental
processed though.
experience, like the healing power you get from adventure, I think outweighs all the downsides of potentially not having the perfect food on your trip, in my opinion.
So you've been, and I know when we spoke originally, you were out in California biking. So is that something that you've picked up or something that you've always done? Or is this something like, through this experience, I'm going to bike through Mexico or bike, in California?
Yeah, no, I've always ridden motorcycles. went down to Mexico to learn how to kiteboard. And you know what that is? It's basically windsurfing. It's like a kite and a little board, and you jump and you fly and you speed. And that was on my bucket list. So I'm like,
Huh.
before I die, I want to do this. So I just went down there, and I went down for 3 weeks, and I almost got it done. And then I went down again for 4 weeks with a motorcycle, and I got it done.
That's so
And
awesome.
now, now I'm not dying, so I can add more things to my list.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, I was also I started helping other people, kind of not, in the same realm of what you're doing, right? And I think it's very rewarding. Like I'm on a lot of groups on Facebook for different things, and I started, people started reaching out. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" So I started doing like some consultations and things like that, and I just love it. It doesn't
So
pay
sharing,
anything, but it's just, I think it's like giving it or passing it forward is also a healing, I think.
well, it comes back to that mental, right? Like you're
Yeah.
helping people always, I genuinely believe everyone in the world, even the meanest of the mean, genuinely enjoy doing good things for other people. Right. And that's a positive thing in people's lives. I think that that's like an endorphin rush, right? It's almost like if I'm a big runner. So you go out and you run a 5K or you go out, run a couple miles. Even this morning, like I went out and walked
Hmm.
and it was positive, right? It got the body moving, the endorphins flowing. Same thing like when helping people, sharing knowledge, especially for what you've gone through, is pretty powerful. To be able, it's a gift, right? To share that
Yeah.
with other people, potentially maybe they can have the same positive results that you've had.
Yeah.
Question.
You're not just making an impact with other cancer survivors, but, for example, the Wim Hof method, right? My mom is 82. The only problem she has is arthritis. And she
Hmm.
hates taking any medication. So she was on some cortisone and she hated it. And I said, Mom, do this. And she started doing it. And within weeks, she was able to get off the cortisone. She's dressing herself. You know, I've had some, you're having impact on people, not just for cancer, but just for other things, like you discover something
Yeah,
that's really healthy and these other people start doing it and you're like, yeah, that feels good. Yeah. So,
it's wild. So other than the one targeted therapy that you're on, the targeted drug for the genetic mutation, and
mhm.
does the mutation have a name? Did they give you a?
It's an FGFR2 mutation. Mm.
Okay.
And that's an FGFR2 inhibitor. It's called Pemazir. It's very rare. It's pretty rare mutation, and it's kind of a newer drug. It's only been out for about 2 years. You know.
But other than that drug, that's the only, we'll say, conventional or let's say Western medicine type drug that you're taking. You're not going in for anything else, any other supplements or anything. Everything else is
Right.
what
Yeah,
you
and I'm
went
only
through in
taking
terms of,
half the dose, so, yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I do take a lot of supplements, but
yep,
not that. And,
nothing that's prescribed.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the only thing. I mean, you can get prescribed whatever you want. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to be like, hey, give me 100 opiates, they would give it to me like this.
Yeah, they give it to you.
They're like,
Sad.
they're like, you need antidepressants? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, you sure? You want some Ativan or something? We'll get it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That now we get into the system, right? This is a systemic problem. Uh, I chuckle here because my mother just had my mother's 75. She just broke her wrist and she refused to, she doesn't like taking pain meds, and I don't blame her.
Mm.
It just bothers her stomach, and she's a two-time breast cancer survivor. And so the doctor prescribed her opiates, and it was like no big deal. Like, here you
Yeah.
go. Here's a whole 40 pack. And she's like, I don't want them. And
My
she didn't take
girlfriend's
them. You know,
daughter
she,
is 15. She hurt her wrist, and they prescribed her like 50 of those things.
It's crazy. But
Mhm.
that to me, so there's a lot of cracks in the system. That's a big crack in the system. And clearly, that's probably another rabbit hole, another we can spend a whole podcast on that. I mean, if we look just in the last year, what the data, I mean, we had more people, ever overdose from drug overdoses in the last year in 2021 than we've ever seen in the history of the
Yeah.
world. So clearly there's a problem, right? There's a problem that we have. And I think systemically, back to your point, like, how does a doctor not talk about nutrition or know about nutrition, or someone in there, it should probably be commonplace that the nutritionist and the doctor go hand in hand on not every appointment, but probably every initial appointment or every other appointment. Maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't have the
And
answer to that
throw in
question.
a psychologist in the mix,
Yeah.
especially in
But,
the
but it's
beginning.
like, I think a psychologist though, Rainer, that's not just going to prescribe a medication to lift your mood,
Yeah.
because I know for my dad, again, I can speak from our experience. Like, we had a psych consult. My dad was depressed. No, no shit. He was depressed. He's just given a stage 4 diagnosis. I'm sure 99.9% of the people that walk into a room and the doctor says, "Hey, you may have potentially 3 to 6 months to live," are going to be really freaking depressed. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? Um, so I get, that the system is what it is, but that doesn't make it right, right? So if we can help amplify, raise awareness, talk about these things that people should be self-advocating for themselves, because unfortunately, the doctors, aren't going to offer these things. It's like, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
So that's why this podcast and podcasts like it are so powerful, Rainer, and sharing what you're doing, in hopes that someone listening, will do the same thing. So I appreciate the honesty and sharing the protocol there that you're on. I got a couple questions for you here, and then we hope to give our audience a place where they can follow your journey. I know you're on social. That's how kind of we connected. But one of my questions here is, example that I just mentioned, someone listening just gets diagnosed, gets pulled into the office today, their stage 4 diagnosis. Given what you've experienced, what you've gone through, what would be the best advice? Or, it doesn't have to necessarily be one thing. It could be a handful of things that you would say to that person for them to do, given what you've gone through and
Yeah,
what you
it's
know.
it's funny you say that, but I was just thinking about that. I want to write like this little something for people who just get diagnosed, who didn't get lucky like me with all the support. There's so many things. I mean, just the idea to get a second or third opinion, right? A lot of people don't know how to do it. Um, but that's definitely something I would recommend, right? To get at least two more opinions. So had I listened to my first doctor, I'd be dead for sure. I mean, there is no support for anything, nutritionally or anything. Um, then I don't know, there's financial aid. A lot of people don't realize there's a lot of financial aid. I didn't have to take advantage of it, but there's places where you can get grants, you can get discounted cell phone service, you can get discounted internet, you can get a handicap parking, placard. There's so many things to help people like us that you aren't told about. That you kind of have to go fight for yourself. Like when I have to say, I'm enjoying my handicap parking sticker. I wish they would make one for my dirt bike. But at the time when I got it, it was a lifesaver because I was so weak, and I didn't, luckily I found out and I knew about it. But there's a lot of things that people don't know and that are available. Hmm. But getting a second and third opinion, I think, would be the most important things I did initially.
I got a question for you on that just came up. Why did you get the second and third opinion?
My girlfriend did it. I mean, I was like in a haze when I got diagnosed. I was in a haze because I wasn't necessarily depressed. I was just like, I'm very methodical. I was just kind of like planning things. I'm like, okay, so how am I going to tell the kids, what I'm going to tell them? I got 3 to 6 months. What can I do? What can I still do when? That kind of thing. So I just got busy. I never thought about the second and third opinion, but she is in the medical field. So she's like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And she did it and she set it up, you know. So I want to do something like that where I have a list of things, to do. Maybe this is what you call Like where do you call at Johns Hopkins? They have a service like that. It's very simple. Once you
Hmm.
know they have it, you send your sample, and within 3 days, it's $500, and you get to talk to the professor. So those kinds of things.
The reason why I asked the question is, I think what you said there, second opinion, third opinion, is golden. And I've always questioned this. This is kind of like the big thing that, like, there's a couple big things, but in my 12 years here, and sometimes I use this analogy. I think people are very fearful of a second opinion because they don't want to know what they don't know. And also, I think by going to get a second opinion almost undermines the faith and trust they have in that first doctor. And I used to see this, and how I relate this to is in my previous life, I was in the financial services business. And I used to deal with clients. I also had an insurance brokerage and would deal with advisors. And I remember, doing business with clients and advisors. And, there were clients that lost millions of dollars with advisors, financial advisors, and they would still stay with that financial advisor. And I said, why? Why would you stay with him? He lost you a lot of money. You could have done a lot better, even buying like the S&P or something.
Yeah.
And I think there's like a psychological thing behind that. Like people don't want to admit maybe that they made a mistake.
Yeah,
And
that can
I
be.
relate that
Mhm.
to the second opinion, which doesn't mean that you're making a mistake because you're going, and sometimes we see a lot of this. And again, I mentioned this a lot on this podcast. I relate to a lot my experience. My parents absolutely refused to leave the community hospital that we were at. Now, they had good oncologists. They weren't great. They were good. They had a good surgeon, wasn't great. But we were 20 minutes from Yale, which was a major medical center, and they had specialists in pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And I look back, and my thing was I should have pushed harder to get my mom, to get my dad to Yale early
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
Would things have been different? I don't know. But, maybe getting that second opinion right away. But what I find a lot of times, Rainer, is a lot of people come to us 2 years in or a year into treatment and now want that second opinion because now they've realized, like, hey, like the doctor that they're with has done everything they can do. Maybe we need to find a higher volume center with clinical trials or with something
Yeah.
else. And
Hmm.
that's where I think that initially, so it's so powerful what you said about, getting a second and third opinion, early on, even if it validates what that doctor's doing, it's so important, the original doctor.
Right. It's also not just and the other thing I didn't mention, I forgot, we also interviewed doctors, right? So we didn't
Yeah.
just take the first doctor, I think we spoke with three doctors, and it's also, I mean, you're gonna be dealing with this person like one on one for many years, hopefully. So the personal connection I thought was very important to me. Like one doctor to me had no personality. We just didn't
Yeah.
click, and I just didn't feel it. So that's also, besides the opinion, find somebody that speaks to you. Yeah. So,
Which is so powerful, Rainer, because you talk about the mental mindset,
mhm.
early on in the mind. So if you click with that doctor and you believe in that doctor, right, that's so powerful, for that mindset. But if
Yeah.
you don't click and you don't feel comfortable, I've had plenty of conversations with families and they've said, oh, the doctor's so abrupt and he doesn't answer our questions. Then leave. Don't stay.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. It's your life you're fighting for. So you should feel 100% comfortable, 120% comfortable that that person is there for you and the best that you can do.
Yeah. No, I agree.
My last question here for you, and this is a loaded question. There's no right or wrong to it. But given your experience, what's your definition of pancreatic cancer?
It's a gift. That's my definition. To me, it's a gift because I live a different life now. I live a better life. I helped some people. I made an impact. Um, And yeah, I just, it changed my life. I mean, if I'll die eventually, I might change my mind, but well, now, I mean, I mean, I quit my job. I have less money, but I have more experiences. And I have less things and I have more experiences. And, maybe every day I live now is like a week in my previous life because, I have these deep experiences. So that's the change. That's how I look at it.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
I wish more people had that mindset and lived that way. I think the world would be a lot better place.
Yeah. I mean, it's the attitude is your altitude, right? So it's an old saying, but it's true.
Powerful. Rainer, thank you for being a guest and for sharing your journey. Last thing here, if someone listening to this podcast, as I mentioned, maybe they just got diagnosed and they want to learn more about your protocol, or someone who's going through it wants to learn more about what you've been doing and connects with you and wants to talk to you and see if that might help them, where's the best place for our audience to reach out to you? Social media, email, people have given their phone out. So
Yeah,
it's totally up
my
to you.
email address is, hold on, let me give you my Instagram. My girlfriend just set up a page for me for my cancer stuff. She just did. It's RZ, like the letters, Reiner's X. So it's RZ Beats Pancan. I'm on Instagram. So that's where you can reach me. And then my email address, if people want to reach out, it's my full name @gmail.com.
Awesome.
Right?
Here, I'm looking at your social media here. You got is that a tuna?
Yeah, it was
Little
my trip.
fish.
It was my trip to Mexico last month.
Wow, man, the views are unbelievable. And then I got one here with your bike, your whole getup.
Yeah.
Wow, that looks the pictures here look pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty special stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Rainer, thank you for being a guest on the Project Purple podcast and sharing your journey.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, Keep doing it. I mean, podcasts like yours are one of the reasons I'm where I am, I mean, that's where you get your information, or at least, they make you think, there's something else. It's not just what they feed you, but, there's information you can get, so thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch 4 years in, and then we'll do another one 6 years.
Absolutely. You're on. I'll hold you to that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Take care. Nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like what you hear today, or where you watch us on YouTube, please feel free to follow us. Feel free to share this episode. And thanks for listening. Until next time, please be safe. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast.